Good afternoon, everybody. This is Tim. I I hope everybody's having a good day. Um, just wanted to make a video today about self accountability, continuing what I was speaking about in my previous messages about how our human inheritance and how to get it and how to see it and how we're supposed to operate in it because we all have the question as a human being, why am I here and what was the purpose of my existence? And I was speaking about how it takes self accountability to want to know who you are and what your purpose is, and your purpose is what God's purpose is for you, and the purpose for you is to live your life abundantly. And to know how to live your life abundantly, you're gonna have to learn who you are, and learning who you are is taking accountability on how you learn and the information you receive, and searching for information out there that's pertaining to who you are, such as education. And learning who you are is learning who your conscious self is, as well as your physical self. So you know how you function. And God allowed us to build our intellect by educating ourselves in who we are, and that's how we eventually built an educational system and built our intellect on how we survive. So, learning self accountability is learning how self preservation is applied in our lives and how to preserve the environment around us and the environment He placed us in. So, the mind collects information and we are able to articulate it and how it works because we were looking for answers for self preservation. And that was his way of answering who we are by giving us the intellect and the ability to collect intellect on how we work and how we tick. And coming into that intellect, some people had the ego to try to turn God's intellect around and turn it into their own vision, which is not. If you try to turn right into evil, he punts you back what he eventually said, which we call karma, and that's how he turned the intellect back around to what he said, because we had a backlash of a punishment that was out of our own decision, because we tried to punt his intellect against his, which would be a slap in the face to anybody who would invest in somebody, and then once you invest your intellect into them, they stab you in the back and try to use it against you to attack you. And attacking God would be to attack His system and the ones He loved, and we're the ones He loved. So that's how people, and what they said back in the Egyptians' days, the snake. And in the Bible, the snake was a deceiver, and that's how you become a snake in God's garden, by turning His intellect against Him. But when the purpose of the intellect was for self-preservation. So, which is why we kind of got stuck and stumbled in ourselves through history, because we tried to punt slavery when God said we were all royalty. And when He said we're all royalty, He had to give the same answer to every single human being who asks the question, "Who am I?" So the people who tried to put slavery were actually slaves to their own ego, and there was never a real concept for slavery. It was just someone trying to turn God's intellect against His, because they thought their intellect was superior than someone else's, depending on culture or gender. So that's why we have to keep our ego in check and learn that it's not about us to get the answers we need to preserve ourselves as well as preserve society. And we have to put our resources together to help people realize who they are, because some people don't realize who they are, so they get stuck in a story that's been going for over a few years. But you're running your life over an old story, which means you're not really going anywhere consciously growing and maturing in the way that you should go. and taking self accountability for the actions you can take to preserve yourself. So, and the purpose of self accountability is also learning how you function in a family and function in a marriage. Because if you bring your ego to the marriage and you don't want to listen to the other one, your spouse, you are closing your mind and your heart to what preserves them. But you told them you love them, so why wouldn't you take the accountability to listen to them and see what preserves them and see how they preserve themselves, which is the intellect you were gathering when you first started speaking to each other. So you have to realize in the marriage that it takes two people to get to know each other, and you're learning what preserves each other and each other's personality. So why would you come into marriage and just and just turn around and turn their intellect into something that's harming them? You took what they invested in you, and you're throwing it in their face because you want to feel superior in the conversation or argument that you guys had, when it's not about who had the last punch, it was about who had the last solution. So in all of God's intellect, He showed us how to preserve our marriages and our family, and we have to teach the kids how the light is the intellect we need to preserve ourselves. Gathering intellect from the light, we're learning emotional intelligence, which means there was no measure in success because it was about the light preserving itself within its own creation. And that's how he was showing us who we are, through how he taught us how to preserve ourselves, as well as get to know his personality and the laws that he placed here to preserve us. So it was never about the material things that we were desiring for and fighting for and killing for. It was actually the intellect that was the wisdom and wealth that we needed to survive. So we have to spread the resources from the intellect by articulating what preserves us individually as well as a whole. That's how we're in the one and the one and the all, and we all have to live off and eat off the same intellectual table, so we will all be on the same page on what keeps us alive and not go extinct. So it was God who kept us alive in the light, and He created us to articulate the light, so we can see our innocence in it. And that's why Jesus died on the cross, so we can start articulating from the innocence and stop being barbaric. Because we didn't see what we saw, a physical crown. He saw a spiritual crown, you would say our conscious crown. And in that, it shows us an opportunity to look within ourselves and build the heaven that He's putting us to create through His intellect, and us being able to articulate it and to interpret it in a way that we can hold on to it, which will hold the key to our existence, which He had the patience to tell us who we are through our ignorance. So getting to know yourself, you're able to articulate things that will preserve yourself and preserve others by building jobs and becoming business moguls or entrepreneurs, or even just a confidant that we look for. We're looking for somebody to acknowledge us and help us and guide us in answers to preserving ourselves. So we look for people with answers, and that's why Jesus played a big part in our history as a teacher, because He was showing us how to walk with the light to preserve ourselves, even though we were ignorant. And in those days, throwing a tantrum as a king, they were upon people to crucify Him, and that means they couldn't take the intellectual battle of the truth. And that's when your ego gets in the way of God's vision of progressing heaven, because he said, "Let there be," was upon from heaven to heaven, and this heaven, physical heaven, has to mirror and reflect His conscious heaven above. As above, so below; as below, so above. Which means we will have to go by His blueprint of how He made things work, and we're just collecting information of what He already done. That's why our mind is just collecting memories of time, putting a story together, trying to figure out what's reality. So, analyze self-analyzation is taking self-accountability for how you function and how you learn and how you function in him and how he functions in you. And that's when you build a relationship with him, walking with him consciously by going by his word and giving him the last pun in every situation that comes your way. That's how he fights your battles for you, by guiding you through his intellect to preserve you, because he loves every single one of you. So in that, I've been teaching on my walk and my walk in him, and putting my puzzle pieces that I got throughout my personal life into a message where you see God in my life and you could pinpoint where he's been at in your life. He's been in everything because he's the all-seeing eye. He's been in your bad, the good, and the ugly. And when it gets ugly and you fall down, don't ever put yourself to staying down, because he told you to get up, which means you have to take his last pun and put your strength together and get back up and get back on the horse and keep going, even though life may seem like it's going absolutely nowhere when it is going somewhere, because he gave you time to get somewhere. So make a destination and a plan and a goal to a destination where you want to be, and just go through the process of building up to that. Building up to that level where you can step into that blessing that he has for you, because he will get you to where you need to be. All you got to do is listen and give him the last pun, because all he's doing is training your mind to stay positive. So it's like he throws a thought in your hand, and you have to throw it back with his last pun, and he will either say yay or nay. If it's a pun of self-preservation, then he will say yay. But if it's a pun to depletion or extinction, he will say no, which will guide the journey on a better path, because you know where not to go and you know where to go. As long as you put in the effort, you will start building a system and a vision around that goal, and you will eventually get to that point where you feel at peace in everything that he's ever told you. And you'll also build a relationship with him, learning who you are as a human being, because you have the right to know who you are. So, in knowing that we all eat at the same intellectual table, we have the responsibility to show the kids how to sit at the table and eat properly without them getting in their own way of where he's taking them, because they're future heaven and they're our future, and they have the opportunity to take it further than us, because now they have more time than we do. And that's they're the ones who's going to take heaven further. So the ones behind them, or in front of them, you would say, because that would be their future, can also do the same thing and then take it further, where we can deplete things like crime and poverty on the fact that we passed on the intellectual answers to questions that they're going to have. But if we give them an answer, that self-preservation, that situation would already be taken care of, then they can focus on things that has to be done that we didn't get to. So that's how we progress as society. So in learning all of this, I came up with the brand for peace, vision of peace, because in learning this, I learned that that's how we preserve the peace, by preserving self-preservation, because everybody's looking to be preserved in the end until he says otherwise, because he's the God of life and death and time. So it's a timing for everything, and he holds time in his hands by standing out of time, by guiding us, because we don't. It's like looking into the dark to us, but he's the light, so he shines the light on our path, and it's up to us if we want to walk it or not. But if we decide not to walk it, we're taking the risk of falling into a ditch which we didn't see or dug ourselves on account of ignorance. So, in this message, I want everybody to understand that it was our inheritance to find out who we are, and it took self-accountability to walk that journey to find out the answers. And in the end, we just want God to tell us who we are as a human being and our purpose for being here, and understanding why I was created, and getting to the origin story of God will complete our story, because we'll understand where our creator came from. And my My prediction on getting that story is we will be able to get it when we leave this earth, because it's that would complete the reason I was here on earth. I was able to share the intellect that I gathered from him here and get the rest of the story afterwards and understand the purpose of why I was created. And we all have the same opportunity by walking a right, straight path and making sure I make the right decisions so I can get the rest of the answers and the rest of the story that our God is telling us on why He created things around us and our very being. So don't squander your inheritance on the fact that you don't want to look in the mirror and make corrections that will get you to where you want to be and where you desire to be. And where we desire to be is the desire to be is at peace in the end, and in love and in good health, and live life abundantly. So the message I send out there, I hope it will help somebody see their life in perspective of the decisions they're making, so they can see God, our creator, for themselves. And I hope I put this message together in a way people understand where they are and where we're at in time and what our jobs are and how to point in the right direction for the kids to see what life is all about. And it's not all about what you see all the time physically and how you can pleasure your flesh all the time. It's about actually thinking about why you are here. And in the end, it's about having a heart, and that's what stays in people's mind, is you being a good person and you making connections and making resources, and you making a difference in the environment you were born in, and you feel fulfilled that you had a purpose here and you made a difference in somebody else's life on a positive note and built them up instead of working on tearing people down for selfish reasons. So I challenge you today to build on the intellect of who you are and ponder on if you're making the right decisions, and if you're not, just make the right adjustments by giving him the last puns in your life, and you'll see him work in your life by seeing that it was true, that his pun was the reason that you get to your purpose and get to the blessing and get to the dream that you want to manifest, because he's teaching you how to manifest it in a proper way, because there's a timing for everything, for everyone. We're just on a different story. So let God tell your story, and you co-write with him by the decisions you make in time. We're just in time punning a story of heaven and self-preservation and how we preserve heaven. So I'll be making some more videos, and I am putting some events together. I will make some videos on when they will be available. Well, I will put up the dates for the events on my social media, and I will speak to you guys later.